Welcome back to Project 613. Today we learn two mitzvot. The first is called Hasagas Gvul, and that means that it's a prohibition to move the boundary marker between one's property and the property of one's neighbor. This would be a way of extending your property and in effect stealing land from your neighbor. So it's forbidden to move the boundary. As the verse says, Lo tasig gvul reacha, do not move the boundary of your neighbor. And even though we previously learned that it is forbidden to steal, theft is forbidden, so what's the difference? This is in effect another type of theft. The Torah nevertheless adds an additional prohibition for someone who moves the boundary between him and his neighbor, that he would be violating not only the prohibition of stealing, but also an additional prohibition. This prohibition only applies in the land of Israel, as the verse clearly stipulates, benachlatcha, in the land that you have inherited, that which refers to the land of Israel, whereas someone who does this in the diaspora will of course still be violating the prohibition of theft, but will not be violating this additional prohibition. This idea of not moving the boundary between you and your neighbor also extends to other areas where a person would infringe on his friend's rights, whether it's in business, in sales, in trying to get in the way of a business deal that someone else is doing. All of this falls under the banner of Hasagas Gvul, which in effect is extending yourself into someone else's space, into someone else's business, and thereby taking away from them. The second mitzvah that we learned today is the prohibition of kidnapping. This is actually one of the 10 Commandments, where the verse says, Lo tignov, you shall not steal. And as we mentioned previously, the verse, you shall not steal, in the 10 Commandments is not referring to theft of property or theft of money, but rather to kidnapping, the theft of another human being. And we know this from a principle called davar halamed minyano, which means we learn things based on their context. Many times the interpretation of a verse could be understood based on its context. And since the context of the 10 Commandments is prohibitions which are capital punishments, like murder, like adultery, so too, when we are told, thou shalt not steal, this has to be a type of theft that could be punishable by capital punishment. There should be a capital crime. What would that be? That is the case of abduction, when someone kidnaps someone, and not only they kidnap them, but if they kidnap them and then sell them on to another party, then in the time of the Sanhedrin, this would be punishable by death, and therefore this is a capital crime, and that is what it's referring to in the 10 Commandments when the verse says, Lo tignov, that thou shalt not steal. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.